James Madison was born on March 16, 1751, in Virginia. He grew up as the eldest of 12 children on his family's plantation, Montpelier, in Orange County. A quiet, studious boy often in delicate health, Madison nonetheless pursued learning with vigor and developed a keen, disciplined mind. From age 11 to 17 he studied with tutors who instilled in him a love of classical languages, history, mathematics, and philosophy. At 18, in 1769, he headed north to the College of New Jersey, now Princeton University, where he excelled, blazing through a 4-year curriculum in 2. Upon graduating in 1771 with top honors, he remained engaged in academic study, but the American Revolution soon broke out and Madison was eager to apply his ideals. Though he did not take up arms, he threw himself into the patriot cause through politics. In 1774, at just 23, he joined his local Committee of Safety, a revolutionary group that organized resistance to British policies. By 1776, as the colonies declared independence, Madison won election to the Virginia legislature, where he helped draft Virginia's first state constitution and collaborated with leaders like Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson on revolutionary legislation. Madison was a quiet presence, but he quickly earned respect for diligence and insight. He notably clashed with the fiery Patrick Henry over religious liberty. Madison advocated complete separation of church and state, opposing efforts to maintain public support for churches. During the war years, Madison continued to rise. In 1777 he lost a bid for re-election to the Virginia House of Delegates, reportedly because he refused to engage in the era's customary vote buying with alcohol. He soon received an appointment to Virginia's prestigious Council of State, and in 1780, at age 29, he was sent to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. There he advocated better support for General Washington's army and pressed to empower Congress to fund the war effort and regulate trade. After the war ended in 1783 with American victory, Madison returned to the Virginia House of Delegates. There he achieved a major legislative victory by helping Jefferson shepherd the statute for religious freedom to passage in 1786. He also witnessed up close the economic turmoil and populist unrest that plagued the new country under the loose Confederation. Seeing these as symptoms of a dysfunctional system, he joined the Annapolis Convention in 1786, a meeting of states to discuss commercial problems. That gathering, led by Madison and Alexander Hamilton, called for a full constitutional convention to overhaul the government. In 1787, those efforts bore fruit. Madison was elected a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia and arrived well prepared with the Virginia plan he had drafted. He called for a strong federal structure with proportional representation in a bicameral legislature, an executive, and a judiciary, a radical departure from the one-state, one-vote Congress under the Articles of Confederation. Throughout that hot summer of debates, Madison was a central figure, earning the moniker Father of the Constitution for his contributions. When the Constitution was sent to the states for ratification, Madison emerged as one of its fiercest champions. He teamed with Alexander Hamilton and John Jay to write the Federalist Papers, a series of essays explaining and defending the proposed Constitution in detail. Madison's contributions, 29 of the 85 essays, included some of the most famous, such as Federalist No. 10, on controlling factions, and No. 51, on checks and balances, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. Thanks in large part to Madison's arguments and behind-the-scenes lobbying, a closely divided Virginia voted to ratify the Constitution, becoming the 10th state to do so. With the new government launched in 1789, Madison served in the U.S. House of Representatives for 4 consecutive terms. As an ally and advisor to President George Washington, he wielded enormous influence in the First Congress. Most notably, he fulfilled a promise to anti-federalists by introducing a set of amendments that became the Bill of Rights. Madison sifted through numerous suggestions from the states to craft a concise list of fundamental liberties, from freedom of speech and religion to the rights of the accused, and steered them through Congress. 10 of these amendments were ratified by 1791, forever enshrining individual liberties in the Constitution. During the 1790s, Madison's political alliances shifted as debates over fiscal and foreign policy split the founders into factions. He began the decade as a close collaborator of Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton, helping pass measures that set up the new federal government. However, Madison grew wary of Hamilton's expansive vision of federal power, such as the creation of a national bank and assumption of state debts. By 1792-93, Madison aligned with Thomas Jefferson in opposition to what they saw as Hamilton's monarchical tendencies. Together, Jefferson and Madison formed the nucleus of the Democratic-Republican Party, championing states' rights and a strict interpretation of the Constitution. In 1798, Madison took a stand for civil liberties against the Federalist-controlled government of President John Adams. Angered by the Alien and Sedition Acts, laws that punished criticism of the government and targeted immigrants, Madison secretly authored the Virginia Resolutions, passed by the Virginia legislature, declaring the Sedition Act unconstitutional and affirming the state's right to interpose against federal overreach to protect their citizens' freedoms. By the turn of the century, Madison was effectively the floor general for the Democratic Republicans, organizing Thomas Jefferson's successful presidential campaign in 1800. When Jefferson became the third president in 1801, he chose Madison as his Secretary of State. Madison served as the nation's top diplomat for 8 years, during which the United States doubled in size with the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. Madison helped negotiate and defend the purchase of that vast territory from France, an act he considered clearly constitutional as a treaty power. He also dealt with the increasing strain between the US and the warring powers Britain and France. He oversaw the ill-fated Embargo Act of 1807, Jefferson's attempt to punish Europe by halting American trade, a policy that backfired economically and stirred controversy. By 1808, Madison was the obvious choice to succeed his friend as president. The foremost challenge of his presidency was the escalating conflict with Great Britain. For years, Britain had been seizing US ships and impressing American sailors into the Royal Navy during its war against Napoleon's France. Madison spent his first years in office attempting diplomacy, but with limited success. By 1812, domestic pressure from pro-war warhawks in Congress reached a fever pitch, and the cautious Madison asked Congress for a declaration of war, making him the first US president to lead the nation into war. The War of 1812, often called America's Second War of Independence, dominated Madison's presidency and was filled with perils. In the early going, the United States was ill-prepared. Years of Jeffersonian policy downsizing the military and dismantling the national bank left the country short on professional soldiers, ships, and funds. Initial American invasions of British Canada failed disastrously, and New England Federalists opposed the war. Despite setbacks, there were bright spots. In 1813, Captain Oliver Hazard Perry won a crucial naval victory on Lake Erie, and in 1814 U.S. forces repelled the British at Baltimore, an bombardment that inspired Francis Scott Key to write the Star-Spangled Banner. The lowest moment for Madison came in August 1814, when British troops sailed into Chesapeake Bay and marched on Washington, D.C. The president had personally gone out to encourage American militiamen at the Battle of Bladensburg. But the militia panicked, and Madison was swept back in the chaotic retreat, narrowly avoiding capture. The British then entered the capital and burned the White House, the Capitol, and other public buildings in retaliation for an earlier American raid in Canada. First Lady Dolley Madison became a national heroine for her actions during this crisis. As the British advanced, she refused to leave the White House until she had secured valuable national treasures, including the famous Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington. Despite the humiliation at Washington, American fortunes rebounded. Later in 1814, U.S. forces scored a defensive victory at Plattsburgh, and peace negotiations with Britain began in Europe. Madison's government agreed to the Treaty of Ghent, signed in December 1814, and ratified in February 1815, which essentially ended the war. Unbeknownst to the negotiators, General Andrew Jackson won a lopsided victory against the British at the Battle of New Orleans in January 1815, making Americans feel as if they had triumphed, even though this battle took place after the treaty. The war's end unleashed a powerful wave of patriotism. Madison's leadership during the war left the country intact and more unified. In its aftermath, the old Federalist Party collapsed, having opposed the war, which ushered in the so-called era of good feelings with only one major political party. Domestically, Madison made pragmatic policy shifts in his second term. He came to support re-establishing a national bank and strengthening the army, measures he and Jefferson had once resisted. In 1816, Madison signed the charter creating the Second Bank of the United States, acknowledging that a stable national currency and credit were vital lessons from the war. He also approved a protective tariff to help American industries. However, Madison remained a constitutional stickler. In his last act in office, he vetoed an internal improvements bill for roads and canals, arguing that federal funding for such projects required a constitutional amendment. By 1817, as his two terms came to a close, Madison left office with the nation on firmer footing. At age 65, he retired with his beloved wife Dolley to their Virginia estate, Montpelier, where he remained an engaged observer of national affairs and a respected elder statesman. One of his first projects was to organize and edit his extensive personal papers, including the secret Constitutional Convention notes, with an eye toward eventual publication. He knew these documents would shape how posterity viewed the founding era, and he arranged for Congress to purchase his manuscript notes after his death to provide Dolley with financial support. Madison also stayed engaged with civic causes. He became the second rector of the University of Virginia, succeeding Thomas Jefferson after Jefferson's death in 1826. Publicly, Madison continued to voice his opinions on the issues of the day. In the 1830s, as sectional tensions rose, he watched with concern as some Southern politicians invoked the old Kentucky and Virginia resolutions to justify the doctrine of nullification, the idea that a state could nullify a federal law. Madison emphatically rejected nullification, arguing that his 1798 resolutions never sanctioned unilateral nullification or disunion. One area where Madison's legacy is more complicated is slavery. He had been a slaveholder all his life. Montpelier was a working plantation sustained by over 100 enslaved African Americans. In his later years, Madison grew increasingly troubled by the problem of slavery's future in the Republic. He corresponded with thinkers at home and abroad about potential solutions, such as colonization, the idea of resettling freed black Americans in Africa. In fact, Madison became president of the American Colonization Society in the 1830s, lending his name to the movement that eventually founded Liberia. Yet he never freed the people he enslaved. In his will, he left them to Dolley, merely with a request, not legally binding, that she not sell them without their consent. In his final years, Madison enjoyed a reputation as a venerable founding father. He and Dolley continued to host visitors at Montpelier, where Madison, ever the gentleman scholar, would discuss crops, books, and politics. In the spring of 1836, bedridden and weakening, he died peacefully on the morning of June 28 at the age of 85. Fittingly, he was the last surviving signer of the U.S. Constitution, closing a chapter in American history. Unfortunately, after Madison's death, financial pressures led Dolley to sell many of the enslaved people, including Paul Jennings, Madison's personal manservant at the White House. Jennings later gained his freedom and in 1865 published A Colored Man's Reminiscences of James Madison, the first memoir of life in the White House, offering a unique first-hand glimpse of Madison's character and of the dramatic events of 1814 when the British invaded. Dolley Madison lived until 1849, cherished for her role in Washington society and as the keeper of James's legacy. James Madison was buried at Montpelier with a simple gravestone bearing only his name, no titles, per his wishes. It was a modest end for a man who had held the nation's highest office, but it resonated with Madison's character as a humble Republican who believed ultimate power resided with the people. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deeper look into the extraordinary life of James Madison, architect of the Constitution, champion of civil liberties, and one of the most quietly powerful minds behind America's founding, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you're first to know when we uncover more pivotal figures from history. See you next time.